Hello, everybody. We are going to be getting started in just one moment. We're going to give everybody about one more minute to log on, and then we will jump right into our fantastic presentation. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us and welcome to this afternoon's program. I'm Leah Murphy, Associate Director of Regional Student and Young Alumni Programs with the Office of Alumni Relations. Before we proceed, I'd like to acknowledge our sponsor, the Healthcare Affinity. Now, before I turn the program over to our moderator, I encourage you to ask questions by typing them into the Zoom Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Just a reminder that that's different from the chat, so you want to be sure to use the Q&A. Now, I have the pleasure of turning the program over to our moderator, Jessica Bast, Sustainability Outreach Coordinator with Johns Hopkins University's Office of Sustainability.
Hi, everyone. As Leah mentioned, my name is Jessica Bast. I'm the Outreach Coordinator for the Office of Sustainability. Fun fact, today is actually my last day at Johns Hopkins, so you guys are joining me for my last day, but it's been really great working here. But it is truly my pleasure to introduce today's guest, Skye Razor. Skye has been an environmentalist all of her life. And over the past 15 years, she has studied the sources of human low-level exposure of toxins and chemicals that we all encounter through our food, cosmetics, beauty supplies, and home furnishings and decor. She holds a BA from the University of Virginia, a master's from Johns Hopkins University, and has an executive degree from Columbia University's Earth Institute Center for Environmental Sustainability with a concentration on food systems. And later on in the event, I'll be sharing some resources from Skye that will help further build off of today's conversation. So Skye, thank you so much for being here today. It really is so wonderful to have you, especially as a JHU alum. And so I'd love to kick it off with our very first question. So if you could tell us about your background and how you became involved in the sustainability field. You're muted.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jessica. It's such a pleasure and privilege to be here. I'm sorry it's your last day. I didn't know that, but I'm sure you're on to some wonderful adventures. So I think all my life I've been an environmentalist at heart. It probably started when I went to sleepaway camp in Algonquin Park in Canada for a number of years. And that just planted the seed and laid the foundation for my love of the natural world. You know, at Johns Hopkins, I was at SICE, the International Relations School, and worked for a while at the Pentagon, and then worked at the Nature Conservancy in their international department, Latin American. And then went on to work for actually a Swedish environmental group. But what I started developing some real health issues. And that's what really kicked off my investigation. So kind of regular doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. They said, tests were done. No, you're fine. And I said, well, no, I'm not fine. And I know I'm not fine. And what I ended up discovering is that I just had a toxic overload in my system, and it really affected, it completely impacted my life. And so I went through, you know, a detox program and healed myself. And what's interesting is that this happened to so many people. Dr. Mark Hyman is, you know, extremely well known, and he went through the same thing. So that's what got me on track. And then when I started having kids, I just became so aware of everything around us. And I was researching, I was talking to experts to try and collect this information, really for me. And then I thought, well, it was astonishing what I was learning. So I thought, you know, this has to be shared with everybody. This is a crazy system that we've established. And so that led me then to start a company to help educate and inform people so that we can heal ourselves. And coincidentally, when we heal ourselves, we heal the planet as well. So it's kind of a great twofer. So that's kind of my background. That's how I started.
Great. Yeah, I find with a lot of people interested in sustainability, they either start at a really young age or they have some sort of moment in their life that makes them rethink and reevaluate everything and how their health is impacted from the environment. And for you, it kind of sounds like both. You started at a young age, but you also had this moment where you understood how environmental health was also affecting your health. And I think that ends up being the case for a lot of different people.
Yeah,
So
and I think a lot of people don't even realize that they could feel better. I think it's sort of a you creep into it and a malaise happens. You don't realize you really could be feeling a lot better.
Absolutely, especially when you have doctors telling you that you are okay, but you know that you are not okay. So Sky, if you could give us your definition of sustainable.
Okay, there are so many definitions as you can imagine. I think that one of the most well-known ones is the one that's attributed to the Iroquois, which is that in every deliberation, we must consider the impact on the seventh generation. And another one, probably the one I like best, is that sustainability is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. That to me just really summarizes it. I think it's important that it's broad with a little specificity. Now, when I work with institutions, I have kind of a meatier and more formal kind of mission statement that I have them use. And I'm going to share it with you because I think of households as small institutions. So although the wording is a little dry, you can think of it and apply it to your home or to anything, to your church, to your school. So this is the kind of the mission statement. I'll read it. We are committed to sustainable development and operating practices through the responsible management of building design, construction and renovation, landscape practices, energy use, water and waste management, emissions, transportation, and procurement within a framework of regulatory compliance and fiscal prudence. And the one we're going to kind of focus on today is really procurement, because that's all the stuff we use every day that we buy on a regular basis. And that is easy to have an impact on in a very short period of time. I mean, all those other ones too, emissions and transportation, we can work on those too, but we're gonna focus because it's a fairly broad topic as it is. And I know that there's a lot we want to cover. So we'll focus on that aspect of it. So I think that's kind of a good overview of what sustainable means.
Great. And I think you mentioned you have these different definitions, and for the audience, I think it's important to know that a lot of people have their own definitions, and it's not to say that one is right or one is wrong. I think it's completely normal for people to have their own definitions of sustainable or sustainability. So don't just think that based off of Sky's definition that yours is wrong. I think it's very normal for people to have their own idea of what sustainable or sustainability really is.
Right. Or how we live sustaintably. I mean, exactly. Not everyone can live the same way. Everyone has different parameters, and so it's flexible. It's very flexible.
Yes. And just a quick reminder, if you're joining us, please put your questions in the Q&A. We will be getting to the Q&A later on in this event. So don't just think that I'm ignoring it. We will get to it a little later on. But Sky, a lot of people, when they think about sustainable living, they think that that's going to mean a lot of really intense changes in their lifestyle. But what do you think are some of the easiest changes people can make in their daily routines to reduce their environmental footprint?
Yeah, so we're going to cover a bunch of specifics in 4 categories: plastics, food, personal care products, and kind of home and decor. But before we go into a lot of those details, I want to also do kind of a step back and a bird's eye view about kind of how did we get here as a human species. And I really look at the environmental problem as a spiritual problem. It stems back to Newton and Descartes and this view of human power and our ability to dominate over nature, and that nature is removed and disconnected and cold, and that really drove our science and technology and development, for hundreds of years now. And it also was the basis for amazing technology, but and advances in health, but there was a price to be paid too. So that our systems and our structures are all so profit driven and pushing maximum consumption, and all this changed in generations, right? Not in evolutionary time. So the planet kind of didn't have a chance to keep up with these human changes that happened so fast. And this is our disconnection from the reality that we are intimately and inextricably linked and interconnected and dependent on the natural world. If it doesn't thrive, we won't thrive. And if it's ill, we're going to be ill. We are not separate. And so I think understanding that and really taking it into ourselves, into our hearts, is the start. That's like the real start. Just acknowledging, oh my gosh, what I do affects everything around me. And that really together, if we are all doing lots of little things, it's going to have a huge impact. Because a lot of us sit here and think, if I stop using plastic straws, really, what good is that going to do? But if we have 20 million people in the US not using plastic straws or disposable plastics, single-use disposable plastics at all, it's a huge impact. So, and that's what I want to inspire people to do. Like, little things make a huge difference added up. So that's sort of the overall picture. And now we're going to get to nitty-gritty, because keep an eye on time, so there's so much that we want to cover. And I'm going to consult some notes because I want to make sure I don't leave everything out and cover the stuff that we want to cover. So we're going to start with plastics. And, plastics are petroleum based, right? They're derived from oil, and they pollute at pretty much every step along the way. They pollute air, water, ground, and ends up our bodies as well. From extraction and transportation of crude oil to processing to we add other man-made chemicals into plastics to give them certain qualities, things like phthalates that I think a lot of you have heard of, and then and the molding and the filling and the transporting, again, it literally pollutes everywhere along the way. And with regard to our bodies, the phthalates and the BPA and a lot of these chemicals we add to them are endocrine disruptors, and they end up entering our body through the liquid or the food that touches them. They leach into our bodies. And so if we think about, ecosystem impacts, I'd like to mention this too. Think of the landfills that are absolutely filled with plastic now. And it leaches the chemicals leach into the groundwater. Animals come and they eat them, birds ingest them. Our oceans are there are trash cans. They've turned into our trash cans. And soon there'll be more pieces of plastic in the ocean than sea life. And a lot of you probably heard about the giant gyres, gyres of plastic pollution that are in all of our oceans. It's not just the Great Pacific garbage patch. It's in all of our oceans where it swirls together, and it essentially creates an island of garbage, and birds are now nesting on that. And so those are the big chunks, but the real harm to health for both animals, fish, birds, and humans are the microplastics and the nanoplastics. Plastics never biodegrade. A lot of companies will greenwash and say that they do, biodegradable plastic. That does not exist. What they're doing is they're combining plastic with some biodegradable elements so that they call it biodegradable. It never biodegrades. It just disintegrates into smaller and smaller pieces. So fish eat it, what we're discovering now is that nanoplastics are in the rain that's falling on us. Some of the plastic particles get into the flesh of fish, so we can end up ingesting that as well. So another thing I want to make sure to mention is the myth of recycling. All of us do our duty every week and we put our recycling out, but the scary statistic is that 5% or less of all the plastics that are sent for recycling are actually recycled. 5%, and that's dropping every year. And there are lots of reasons for that, contamination, all sorts of reasons. There's not enough money in the budget of cities to do it. So to me, I keep in my mind, recycling just doesn't exist. So we want to change the mantra from reduce, reuse, recycle to, reduce, reduce, reduce. And it's so much harder under the restrictions of COVID. But if we keep it in mind, there's so many things that we can do. So I do a little show and tell. So for really the single-use plastics are the biggest culprit, and most of those get used for less than 1 hour. So we're using a plastic bottle, we gulp it down, we toss it. We've used it for 1 hour. So I know I'm just going to do a little show and tell. It's really fun. Lots of different water bottles, different sizes we can bring with us. You kind of don't want to do plastic if you can help it, because that is going to leach. So we've got glass and metal. Another thing I wanted to bring up is you don't want to leave plastic in a car that's going to heat up, like in the sun, because the higher the temperature, the more that's going to leach into your water. Another thing is you don't want to heat any food in plastic in the microwave, definitely not styrofoam, although styrofoam is now being outlawed in a lot of places. So even food that's hot and heated, your leftovers, you want to let them cool down before you put them in any plastic ware to put in the fridge. Okay, so I'm sure all of you have the bags for groceries, so no more plastics there. And then there are options for your produce bags, really cute, light options. You can wash them really easily. You just have to remember to bring them with you. There are options for plastic wrap, which I really love. There is Beeswax Wrap, so cotton covered in beeswax that you can use and reuse. And this has antibacterial, antifungal, all that qualities to it because it's made with beeswax. And then there are these silicone covers that you can put over, your glass bottles, and it sticks to them. You can cover your all your leftovers with things like this. They're really everywhere now. You can find them all on Amazon. Food containers, do the reusable ones. Glass. Now the top is plastic, but it's reusable, and a lot of these I've had for 10+ years. And they're plastic reusable ones as well. And then another thing is, instead of using plastic bags for sandwiches, you can use the good old paper bags for sandwiches. And finally, we're going to go to utensils. So these are becoming pretty ubiquitous, the metal straws. I keep a pack of this in my purse. And so these are bamboo cutlery. You can get metal cutlery too, and just keep it with you. And then you don't have an excuse. So when I go to eat and if I have leftovers, I will bring some of this with me. And you just got to get used to it a couple times. You put it in your purse, your backpack, or whatever, and you just say, hey, can you put the leftovers in this, or you just do it yourself at the table. So, these are changes, but once you start enacting them, they just become habit like anything else. All right. So that's the kind of overview for plastics. I may have left something out, but hopefully not. And now we're going to move on to the topic of food. Again, checking the time to make sure we're okay. I think we're okay, Jessica.
Yeah, I think you have about 25 minutes until we start with the Q&A.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we can even start earlier. So our food should nourish and heal us, right? That's why we eat, to nourish and heal us. Hippocrates said, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. And we say, you are what you eat. And these are all extremely true. But what's happened with the industrial agricultural system is our food is actually becoming poisonous to us because we put herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, antibiotic, growth hormones. All these things are all over and in our foods, and they end up polluting our bodies. So it's sort of the opposite of nourishing and healing. Michael Pollan likes to say, you are what your food eats. And I like that one too. So, if your cows are eating genetically modified corn and soy, and it's messing up their digestive tract because it's killing all the microbiome in them, well, they're not going to be healthy. And then you're eating a cow that's really unhealthy, that's never eaten a blade of grass before, even though they evolved to eat grass, right? So this whole industrial system has, it's essentially poisoning our food supply. And it's also, it's running off into the groundwater and the rivers, and those are really hurting all the wildlife around our farms. It's lower quality food. There are fewer ingredients because these chemicals that we spray on them kills the soil. So normal soil is so rich in microbes and nutrients, but we end up killing that. So if you see, kind of the waste, the wasteland, the soil being blown away, soil should never be blown away. It should be rich, dark, and moist, and full of worms and other microorganisms that we can't see. And the problem is that there is a statistic that says we have about 20 to 30 years of usable soil life if we don't change the soil health across the globe. So this industrial agriculture also hasn't ended up yielding more, even though that was the aim years ago. It turns out that over time, it does for the first number of years. But then what the studies have shown is that organic systems actually are much more productive in the long run in terms of diversity, because they're not monocropping, and diversity, quality of product and nutrients. And also when you kill soil, you release carbon. So all the carbon elements of the soil, all the living creatures, they release carbon into the atmosphere also. So, all right. So what can we do about it? Well, I'm going to talk about, I think, 4 main things. If we eat organic, we are contributing to soil health. We are eating healthier for ourselves. We're getting more nutrients and much fewer chemicals. And you do want to focus on live plant-based foods for the most nutrients, right? You want to stay away from the processed and the boxed and the canned, because all those have added chemicals and processing elements to them. So cans lined with BPA, bisphenol A, we want to stay away from, because we know that BPA affects our hormone system. It's an endocrine disruptor. And something that a lot of you might not be aware of, even though you might be avoiding BPA, is that even if it says, no BPA liner on it, they may be using another bisphenol, which is the BP of the BPA. There are dozens of other bisphenols that haven't been tested. So BPA has been tested ad nauseum, but the other ones haven't, and they actually may be even more harmful to us. Jury's still out on that, but likely it's also not good for us. So the solution to that is, eat dried beans, soak the beans overnight before you use them. Jarred tomatoes in glass jars, or Get your tomato sauce from the jars and not the cans. Eat fresh stuff, make soups from scratch. And then if you're going to get veggies and fruits, get them frozen rather than in cans. And as if for other food, chips and anything that's packaged, just check the ingredients and just make sure they're minimal ingredients and that you actually know what they are. If there's a whole bunch of stuff that looks like Latin, you need to ask yourself, or at least be aware that you are making that choice. And then number 2 is with regard to dairy and meats. One of the most impactful things that we can do in terms of our own health and the planet's health, in terms of carbon reduction, is to eat less meat. We do not need to eat meat every day. I know there's so much protein in vegetables, but people don't seem to know that. There's plenty of protein in vegetables. You don't need it from your meat. So I would really encourage you to, I do 2 things. We eat 3 nights a week, we eat only vegetarian. And when we do eat meat, I halved the amount of meat that we eat. And it's been so easy to do. It's, you don't feel like you're suffering, and it has a huge impact. The other thing is that when you eat meat, it is a great choice to eat organic pasture-raised meat, because animals have not evolved to eat soy and corn that we give them. Cows are supposed to eat grass. It's what they thrive on, and it's what adds these great essential oils to them when we eat them. It is so much higher in nutrients, and it's less inhumane. They are given the space that they need. A lot of industrial meat is raised in such a way that the cows, the pigs, the chickens never walk on grass their entire lives. They are not, some chickens aren't exposed to daylight and sunlight because they're kept in these giant sheds. And for me, I don't like eating meat that I know hasn't been treated properly. I think there's just something energetically about that doesn't feel right. And so typically the pasture-raised organic animals are raised humanely and are better for you. And the other thing which I mentioned earlier is a lot of them are fed with genetically modified feed, which it's not good for them. It's not good for us. It kills our gut biome also. And it is what leads to a whole number of diseases they're now discovering. I'm actually jumping to my 3rd topic. Hold off on that 1 second. I want to give you a resource for produce. So the Environmental Working Group puts out each year its list of the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. And so every year they study and they take samples, and they take samples of food residue, and they decipher what chemicals are in the broad range of food we eat, and they come up with their top dirtiest produce foods. I'll give you an example. Kale, so many of us are eating kale now for its health benefits, but kale can have up to 18 different pesticides and herbicides, chemicals on it, 18 different ones. And so typically the thin-skinned fruits and veggies are the ones that get sprayed the most, particularly berries. There's a saying that we use that strawberries are pesticide sponges. So you really, berries are a great place to go organic. So strawberries, spinach, kale, apples, grapes, all of these are typically always on the Dirty Dozen list. And then the things that tend to have thicker skins are in the Clean 15 list. So avocados, pineapples, things like that. So Environmental Working Group, EWG.org is great for that, in addition to some other stuff I'll talk about later too. So the way genetically modified products work is the seeds have been genetically modified to tolerate huge levels of pesticides and other chemicals being sprayed on them. And in fact, what's happened over the years is that the organisms that the sprays are meant to kill actually adapt to the chemical so that they have to spray higher and higher amounts of the chemicals every year. So the sprays will kill all other life, basically, all other plant life, except for the genetically modified seeds. So corn, for example, it'll kill all the little weeds around the corn, but won't kill the corn. But again, huge amounts of spray, which then goes into anything that eats the food and goes into the ground and the groundwater and affects everything around us. It basically sterilizes. It sterilizes life. It's essentially what it does. And the four biggest crops that are genetically modified are corn, soy, canola, and sugar beet. And these are ubiquitous in our food supply. They sneak in everywhere. And so as I mentioned earlier, these chemicals, because they kill living organisms, when we eat them, they actually kill off our microbiome, which we now know is so important for our health, including our brain health. There is now this link between gut health and brain health. And so a lot of diseases have been increasing in frequency in recent years. Leaky gut, allergies, autoimmune issues. Leaky gut causes autoimmune issues, right? Because if things can get through your gut into your bloodstream that aren't supposed to, then that sets off an autoimmune reaction from your body. Gluten sensitivities, even lymphoma has been linked to a lot of these chemicals. There's one chemical called 2,4-D, and this is one of the ingredients in Agent Orange, the biochemical weapon that we sprayed in Vietnam. It's dioxin is the name of the chemical. And we are spraying this on our food. We're spraying this routinely numerous times a season on our food, which it completely shocks me to this day. It's just, you wonder where the common sense is. So again, the solution to this is look for the non-GMO labeling, and just be aware that when you eat particularly corn and soy, unless it says organic or non-GMO, you are likely getting genetically modified food. So like corn chips and tofu, just be aware that those are kind of high priorities if you eat those a lot, to look for the organic non-GMO. And the other thing that I mentioned,
Oh, I was just going to say you have a little less than 15 minutes, just so a little time update.
Okay, cool. I'm almost done here, almost done with food. And then the other thing I just want to reiterate is that you just want to be careful of beverages and food heated in plastics, because remember that the chemicals in the plastic will leach into the foods. And then the resources are Environmental Working Group, the Dirty Dozen Clean 15, just to repeat. Go to your farmers markets, get to know your farmer. It's so much fun. And then you can ask all sorts of questions about how they produce, what do they use, how do they treat their animals. Reducetarian, it's a bit of an awkward word, but Reducetarian has a lot of great ideas for non-meat meals and dinners, recipes. And documentaries I want to mention, because they're such an accessible way to learn things. Sustainable, I think that's produced by Netflix. Sustainable and The Need to Grow are two really great documentaries. Okay, moving on to personal care and beauty products. So we know clean bodies equal a clean planet. There is this link. And we need to be more aware and conscious of what we put in, around, and on our bodies. What we slather on every day, because we also want to give our bodies the ability to use its own innate detoxification system. But like what happened to me, a lot of us just become so, overridden with chemicals that we can't keep up. We can't process them all out. Our body functions can't do what they're meant to do to detox us. And we want to support that ability in our body. Our skin is our biggest organ. Our skin is our biggest organ. So knowing that, we want to be much more aware of what we put on our bodies. And particularly women can use up to 24 products a day, from makeup to shampoo, conditioner, hairspray or gel, lotions of various sorts. And those definitely start adding up. Now, some of the huge kind of multinational companies like Unilever and some other ones have been making some progress in making cleaner products. But it's kind of not happening fast enough. But one of the beautiful things about the past 10 years or so is that there's so many great boutique companies that are now making really clean products. And you can find some of those. I don't want to promote any product in particular right here, but there are a lot of really great boutique companies. And then you're supporting people that are more local, that are just more conscious of what they're putting in. So you'd also probably be really surprised to know that the FDA does not test or approve almost any of the beauty products and the personal care products that go out there. They're not tested. And they're largely kind of self-policing. So they may not put lead in a product, although quite honestly, a lot of lipstick does have lead in it, particularly the really red colors. And the way it works in the US is that you're allowed to put a product on the market until it's proven unsafe. But since there's not really testing done, it kind of doesn't matter, right? But what's interesting is in Europe, it's the opposite. You can't put something on the market until it's been proven to be safe. So it's sort of the opposite approach. Europe puts consumers first, but the US puts companies first. And as you can imagine, once something is on the market, it's really, really hard to get it off the market unless it's a really egregious offense. So what are solutions to our body care product challenge? First of all, you just need to be your own advocate, right? You ask yourself, do I really need to use all the products I'm using? And maybe try and cut back by a few. Also, when you go and look at the products, when you go and repurchase, what you're used to buying, read the ingredients. Be your own best consumer. Read the labels. If there are, 50 ingredients, maybe there's a cleaner alternative. And if you can't pronounce a lot of the words, that's probably an indication there are a lot of chemicals in there. And some of the big ones that we know when we talk about are the phthalates, the BPA, parabens, acetone and toluene. Formaldehyde is even in a lot of products. A lot of these you want to steer way clear of. Two really great resources for this is also Environmental Working Group. They have a database called Skin Deep and EWG Verified, and they have done the hard work, and they will analyze every product. You'd be amazed at how many products they have. They've analyzed every single ingredient, and then they rate it. They rate every ingredient, and then they rate the overall product. So you can see where you stand, where your products stand on that list. And another great company that does the study for verification is called Made Safe, and they have Made Safe verified products. You can go on their website, and they do, whereas EWG is just beauty care. Made Safe is products across the board. It'll be mattresses, furnishings, in addition to body care products. And their standards are extremely high. So that's a great resource. Fragrance is a way that companies sneak in anything they want. So beware of something that says fragrance. A lot of the products I use will be specific about their fragrance. It'll say rose oil. It'll say, lavender oil. And those I know are the fragrances. Also, just going back to a food item, when something says natural flavoring, that's also a way for companies to sneak in what they want to sneak in. MSG is a big thing that falls under that category of natural flavoring. So just be aware of that. So I said, consider using fewer products. I have cut back by so many products. It feels great. I love it. And it's so much cheaper. And I want to give a special note about children and pregnant women. So the body burden of children and the bioaccumulation is so much greater for these little ones. And it's so much more important for pregnant women because it does cross the placenta. It does go into and affect the baby. So be aware of that. Be a little choosier with your kids. There are great products out there now, in Whole Foods and like every store, even like CVS, they've got much more natural products to choose from. And in particular, I know it's really popular now for little girls to be wearing nail polish, but it is super toxic. And your nails are like your skin. You put it on, it goes into your body. So try and hold off on that for just maybe special occasions for little kids. Makeup remover, amazing alternative, coconut oil. It's cheaper, it works great, it's great for your skin. It's light, so it's not really heavy and greasy. So for people prone to oily skin, it won't be as it won't cause as much acne. And I've gone back to using bar soap because I want to reduce the plastic that I use. So we use bar soap both in the showers and at the sinks. I know, old-fashioned, but it works great, and I feel better because we were going through those plastic bottles of liquid soaps so quickly. So that's another action item. The final thing I want to talk about here, I think, in terms of being specific, is sunscreen. You need to steer clear of chemical sunscreens because it looks now like these chemicals can actually be causing cancer as we slather them on our bodies and our kids. So you want to stay away from oxybenzone, avobenzone. Those are both forbidden in Europe, but we can still use them in the US. So you really want to steer clear of those. You want to look for the mineral and barrier sunscreens, zinc oxide, titanium dioxide. Also be careful because some products will combine the barrier and the chemical sunscreens. So although it may say, mineral sunscreen, it could be a combination. Another thing, please steer clear of is look for no nanoparticles. The nanoparticles can get through your skin, and they also kill reefs. So when you put them on you and you go swimming, it has a really bad effect on reefs. And Hawaii has now forbidden all nanoparticle sunscreen. So good for them. Resources. Again, the EWG, Environmental Working Group, Skin Deep, and EWG Verified, Made Safe label. A great documentary is called Toxic Beauty. So take a look at that. All right, and then moving on to Are we doing on time? Okay.
I
this will
think
be
we only
quick.
have about 1 minute.
Good, okay, super fast. Home decorating. No and low VOC paints, adhesives, glues, varnishes. They aren't that much more expensive anymore, and they work great. I've been using non-VOC paint for 15 or 20 years now. Fire retardants, a known carcinogen. They are in our rugs, our carpets, our rug pads. They are just slathered with this stuff. So make sure you get these, 100% wool carpets without fire retardants. And you can just ask. It's really common now. Everyone's asking. Mattresses are the other thing. You really want no fire retardants. California has the best standards. So if it says California standards, you're doing pretty well. Again, I write and I call companies all the time. And they're not proven to retard fires. That's the really shocking thing. Actually, latex and wool are much better at retarding flames than the flame retardants are. Last quick tip, not related to toxins, but to impact our carbon emissions. Change your thermostat. Keep it a little bit hotter in the summer and a little bit cooler in the winter. It can have a huge impact. So think about doing that, and your body gets used to it. Okay, let's move on to questions.
Yeah, and we've gotten tons of great questions, and I'm sorry we won't be able to get to all of them, but we will try to get through as many as possible. One that really stood out to me, which is one that I feel like I'm asked a lot as a sustainability professional, is in providing these suggestions, how do you consider families that cannot afford to make these changes? Many of these changes are only affordable for families that can truly invest in their health.
Yep. The good news is that the prices on these things are coming down, and as more people demand them, the market prices fall. So they're great trends, and I know because I started 20, 25 years ago being really strict about what I bought and what I put in my house, and I know that the prices have really come down. But I think if you are going to choose, I think a couple areas where if you're going to spend a little bit more, it's really worth it, is in those, the Dirty Dozen. If you can splurge, especially on berries. So try and buy those organic or locally, because if something comes locally, it typically has less sprayed on it. And then also dairy, especially if you have kids who are eating a lot of dairy, really, really important to go organic, the cheeses and milks. Because you're getting growth hormones, you're getting all the pesticides that the cows have eaten. So that's where I would say to focus. And then if you can start removing a couple of your beauty products, maybe you can save some money there. So I think for those people who are in a slightly tighter budget, that's what I would focus on. But also know that the trend is really good. And I can imagine in another 10, 15, 20 years that the cost will be on par, and that frankly, it'll be really hard to get anything but organic. I can't wait for that.
Great. Another comment/question. Former FDA chemist has said a little bit of chemicals are better than spreading harder to treat other contaminations from unclean produce. Also, does peeling an apple or potato get rid of most chemicals, or has it been absorbed into them? Should you be washing them in water versus also with soap?
I'll do the second part first. It does get into them. It can help a bit. Tetracycline is commonly sprayed on apples so that they don't get the brown marks, and that they look pretty when they come to you. But it does get into the meat of it. Yeah. You can use soap. You can also use what is it called? The stuff that you clean with too. I'll think of it. I'll think of it. But yeah, you can wash some of it off, and that's a really good thing to do.
Great.
Vinegar. I see someone put vinegar in the chat. Yep, that helps. And vinegar is also a great cleaner throughout your kitchen. I combine vinegar and water, and I use that to spray.
Great. What are your thoughts on organic cotton, plant-based, etc., feminine care products? What else can inform consumers look for?
I just realized I think I didn't finish answering the other question, but yes, I mean, again, organic cotton is great for your clothing, especially for feminine care products. And those options are expanding as well. Is that the gist of the question? Was there another part to it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great, thanks for bringing that up.
And someone actually put a question in the chat, which I thought was great, especially when talking about labels and greenwashing. Someone says, does organic automatically mean non-GMO?
Great question. There are so many labels now, and it can be really confusing. There is a ton of greenwashing. However, if something is labeled organic, it has to be non-GMO, including meat. So if a meat says organic, it means that the animals were not fed GMO feed. So you can be, so organic and pasture-raised to me are really solid, safe labels. Now, the organic board that decides on all the rules of what organic means is getting a little bit watered down with some members who've recently been brought on who might not have as strict standards as others. So I'm keeping an eye on that. But for now, it's one of the best labels out there, the certified organic.
Great. And I think that this is a question that's probably applicable to everyone because we are all experiencing the pandemic right now. But can you comment on being green during these unusual times in COVID?
Yeah, it's really hard. I guess one of the good things is, we're not buying a lot of plastic bottles out and about anymore. One thing that I'm doing is when I get food to take into the house, I'm noticing how different restaurants package food. And when I see that they're being really egregious with the plastics, I don't order from there anymore. And I'll order from the places that have, cardboard packaging. So that's something to be aware of. But it is really hard. I guess some of the good news is we're not going out to restaurants as much. So we're not taking, takeout home, and we're not using, the plastic disposables. If those of you who have kids, the minute you sit down in a restaurant, they'll bring your kids these like really thick plastic single-use cups with straws in them. And what I do is when I sit down, I will tell the person, we are a plastic-free family. Please don't bring any disposable plastic for us. And waiters love it. They respect it. It's not weird anymore. People used to look at me like I was really weird, but now it's just totally normal. So you can ask that for that as well. But it's challenging.
Awesome. Would you consider addressing the fact that genetically modified foods are actually beneficial to the environment by reducing the need and use of pesticides and antibiotics and allow farmers to produce more food while using less resources like water, fertilizer, and land?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think I mentioned this, those are not true. The genetically modified actually requires higher amounts of chemicals to be sprayed. That's the way it works. And what we read that again, because I want to make sure I address all the points.
Sure. You kind of mentioned, or you answered most of it, are actually beneficial to the environment by reducing the need and use of pesticides and allow farmers to produce more using less resources like water, fertilizer, and land.
Yep. And so that's also not true. It kills the soil. So you get a lot of soil runoff that's affecting the waterways. All the chemicals get get leached down through the water systems and ends up poisoning the life there and downstream. And I think, I'm afraid that that's a little bit of the greenwashing that's happened from these really giant companies. It's really what they want us to believe. And it's really not producing more food. We have these giant monocrop fields. A lot of you probably, fly in airplanes over them. In the Midwest, you see miles and miles of the same crop. And that's actually not that healthy. We need a diversity of food. And you also know when it's monocropped that they are spraying a ton on it because of the lack of diversity. If a pest comes, it will wipe out the entire crop. So they have to be spraying that really regularly. So there really needs to be this shift, and this is something that I really like to promote with my company, towards more local, home-based gardens. And there's so much that we can do. I have a garden at my house, and I grow and I live in an urban area. I grow an unbelievable amount of food. And if we all did a little bit more of this, it would have a huge impact. And you could go outside, and I can go in the summer and I can cut my entire lunch out of my garden. It's amazingly delicious.
Great. And I think we have time for one more question. So do you trust consumer apps like Yooka to inform buyers about the safety of beauty and food products they buy by scanning their barcode?
I don't know that one in particular. And the ones, again, that I would trust most are EWG, Environmental Working Group, and their Skin Deep. You can scan. I think they've got an app and you can scan. And Made Safe. Those are the two I found that are really best. And you can look up. EWG has almost every product on the market, unless it's a really obscure one. So yeah. So I don't know that app in particular, but there are very few that I would trust. But thank you. I'll actually look into some of those. If those are proliferating, I'll research those.
And I think we have like one more minute for a question. So if you can answer it really quickly, that's awesome. It's about the Environmental Working Group. How do you reconcile recommending EWG as a resource when about 4 out of 5 professional toxicologists say they overstate the health risk of chemicals? This is based on a survey out of George Mason University.
Well, I would have to look at that out of George Mason. My view is I would rather be safer and more cautious. One of the things that people don't think about a lot is what are the interactions of these chemicals. So while one product, may have just a smidge of whatever chemical, how does that interact with the other chemicals? That's not considered. No one has studied that. It's unfortunately virtually impossible to study, right? Because if we're putting dozens and dozens of chemicals into our bodies a day, trying to decipher which is doing what and what's interacting with what is virtually impossible. So while I might agree with the idea that a little bit of toxins our bodies can tolerate and process out, I think at the levels we're being bombarded with them, I don't think it's reasonable to think that our body can tolerate all of those toxins.
Great. Thank you, Sky. So
Thank
that's
you,
all for the Q&A. And Leah, I will turn it over to you.
Of course, I'm muted. Well, we are out of time. We'd like to thank our speaker and our moderator for their time and talent. We'd also like to thank all of you for joining us on today's webinar. A follow-up email will be shared with you that will include a recording of this program along with a list of resources and the event schedule for all upcoming alumni relations events. And we hope that you will join us at a future webinar. Thanks again. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.